Producing over 500 hours per week of talk radio, GCN Live is a world leader in talk radio. Archives for the following program can be found at gcnlive.com.
Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and of course it's open lines this hour. We're going to talk about any topic you'd like to talk about. All calls are screened, of course. We talk about nutraceuticals, we talk about spiritual issues, geopolitical issues, etc. And I want to start off with some of the issues dealing with some of the latest protocols. I've just done a major update on the chronic obstructive lung disease protocol, COPD, which is both, we call it blue bloaters and pink puffers. Blue bloaters are what we call bullous emphysema. Pink puffers are people that have restrictive lung disease. That can be due to exposure to toxic chemicals, inflammatory reactions, fire. We had one lady who recently had a consultation who had exposure to mixing ammonia and a cleanser in her toilet, and it caused an explosion of ammonia fumes, which caused a damage to her lungs and restrictive lung changes, COPD. Recently, of course, she sent her CT and her X-ray evaluations and so on. She may need a combination of conventional therapies as well. And the first thing is conventional therapy. Firstly, oxygen 16 hours a day will tremendously reduce her progression. She's going to need inhalation therapy, and I recommend the inhalation therapy with our Nutridyne and perhaps Alamax liquid, and also inhalation sprays with the Silver 100, and you can use an Omron or a Sinupulse Elite. Now, of course, we used to sell the Sinupulse Elite. It became extremely popular. Now it's pretty well in every Walgreens, CVS pharmacy across the nation, Walmart. So you can get a Sinupulse Elite. Also, you want to reduce the inflammation in the lung tissue, and that means you want to use both our anti-inflammatories for interfascial and interplane inflammation and adhesions due to fibroblast activation, and that means you scarring, especially in restrictive lung disease. That's Inflamex. Which is 10 times stronger than the old Wobenzyme formula plus serrapeptase silkworm enzyme. And we have cell defense, the most powerful cellular organ protectant against cancer, inflammation, etc. for solid organs, brain, heart, liver, kidneys, etc. In fact, it even inactivates heavy metals that are still present in the body. So, of course, it's interesting that curcumin, and ours is the best long-acting formula available in the world. One of the things I want to ask people to do is to support Nutrimedical. Do not race around thinking, well, I'm going to get all these things from my friends and other places and get a better deal. You're not going to get the same quality of product. You're not going to get the same biological effect. And if you follow the protocols, you're not going to probably get the same end state. And the way you can monitor that is to get a QRMA machine. If you do, yourself, your family, and your friends can get testing done. You can test daily, and they'll tell you if you're making progress. If you want to be skeptical, which is good, I can recommend tests that you can order yourself through labtestingdirect.com, which include labs like Great Plains Laboratory, Doctors Data, Genova Labs, Metametrics, and other labs that can measure everything from organic acids, gene tests, telomere length, everything you can tell. This is what we call molecular functional medicine. It's really, in a sense, it may be considered alternative in one way, but it's not really. It's expanding the scope of medicine to include the molecular basis of why we're sick in the first place. When people with chronic lung disease get activation of fibroblasts, they have activation of free radicals in the lung. So we want to use NutriDefense, which is the most powerful antioxidant that I have, the most powerful in the world, called anhydrous catechin polyphenol. The next most powerful we have is an astaxanthin and omega krill, and the goji berry antioxidant present as well in goji, which is their NutriComplete. The next, of course, is immunoglobulins. There's immunoglobulin deficiency to protect the lung tissue. So you can use NutriImmune, 2 capsules 3 times to 4 times a day, or Immunomax powder made in a smoothie. You got to stop the free radicals, hydroxyl radical, superoxide anion radical, and peroxynitrate. So we have cell detox glutathione, and you're not going to find this equivalent if people get whey protein or try other things. We have the exclusive, most powerful cell detox glutathione, which is acetylated glutathione. It's not a maybe stimulant, it is the glutathione, so it is the stuff. We also have Supernox to open up the circulatory system in the lungs. Often there's pulmonary hypertension. You want to reduce that. And we have our Supernox, which contains not only the arginine, but actinose and other product components that prevent the production of arginine-induced free radicals. So that's very important. We have Nutrimedical, the only long-acting alpha-lipoic acid on the planet. And Nutrimedical is extremely important to recycle all your fat and water-soluble antioxidants because it's a free radical soup going on in your lungs. We have Regenerex, best of formula that includes the dimethyl resveratrol, the green tea select components and other components that are extremely important, including bioperin, black pepper extract to increase absorption. You want to use Allergon. We have an exclusive supplier for that, for enzyme Allergon, which literally eliminates histamine in the lung tissue and elevated levels of interleukin-1 beta and other cytokines that are elevated in lung disease. The Allergon, 1 to 2 capsules 3 times a day, dramatic. You also want to reduce the risk of lung cancer. A person has been previously exposed to heavy metals, volatile smoke, diesel fuel, cigarette smoke, other types of smoke, including marijuana and so on, that can induce skin cancer, lung cancer. So the use of ellagic acid and malignoblock, very important. Our ellagic acid is from the Terminella chibulia. It is 300 times higher concentration than pomegranate, which is the ancient sacred plant that's on the capitals of a lot of the buildings in ancient Israel because it was cytoprotectant. It repairs your DNA or makes the DNA cells to commit apoptosis if they're beyond repair. We have malignoblock, the sulforaphane glycosinolate, 1 capsule equivalent to 5 pounds of broccoli seed extract developed at Johns Hopkins University. It's amazing, amazing stuff. Omega cod liver liquid. This supplies all the fat-soluble vitamins and so on for lung tissue. And, of course, to repair the lung tissue and the body's support of nutrition, because the body's under stress, ageless life support smoothies. Green Tea Supreme. We have the Green Tea Select is our new name for it, Green Tea Select. And if we're replacing the lung membrane tissues because they're damaged by the ongoing free radicals, Nutrifos, 2 soft gels, and I recommend a higher dosage than other tissues because they're rescuing 2 soft gels at least twice to 3 times a day, and Neurogen at least twice a day. And by the way, Neurogen, which is DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, is a brain rescue, along with things like acetylcarnitine, which is brain rescue, and the use of coenzyme Q10. CoQ10 is extremely important to rescue the brain tissue of people, but it also rescues lung. So I would add to this CoQ10, and I usually use the CoQ10 ubiquinol, which gives a background level because it's more absorbed than the CoQ10 Supreme. And to improve the CoQ10 Supreme, you bite into it. Ours is 8 times more absorbed than any other CoQ10. And Omega Supreme, this is important because the fatty acid concentrations throughout our bodies are way out of whack according to Dr. Barry Sears. So the CoQ10 Supreme, 2 soft gels twice a day. We use it for chronic lung disease, vascular disease, arthritis, any inflammatory condition in the body. It's important to get your omega fatty acids elevated. So I usually use both the Omega Supreme Krill, which is astaxanthin, and the Omega Supreme, as you're rescuing the tissues. Additional things that need to be done to try to stimulate healing. Lumen Photon, you can put over your chest, setting 7 for turning off the inflammation, and Nico for healing once you've got the inflammation settled down. And home oxygen. It's very important that people get 16 hours of home oxygen if they have proven by their doctor chronic obstructive lung disease, and they can get it covered by insurance, 1 to 2 liters a minute. So you'll see people with oxygen. It slows the progression dramatically. We call pulmonary hygiene, percussion, inhalation therapy. I'm not a big fan of beta agonists such as Ventolin and some of these other drugs that are long-acting and or steroids, because steroids thin lung tissue, increase the chances of yeast overgrowth and immune suppression. The home oxygen is very important. The problem with these inflammatory beta agonists, you'll find if you use Power C Plus and Allergon in our protocol, which we mentioned here, you'll dramatically reduce the need for asthmatic on top of chronic lung changes and dramatically reduce the amount of mucus production. So hyperbaric oxygen is very good. The hyperbaric dives, 1 to 2 hours per day, and you can use an oxygen concentrator attached, which will add an additional 5 to 8% oxygen in the chamber. Sleep study, I think, is extremely important because a lot of people with obstructive apnea also have a chronic lung disease. And if they're hypoxic or hypopneic, which means to drop their oxygen, it's very important to try to get the oxygen levels up. So we've had a lot of consult requests recently on chronic lung disease, so I thought it would be worthwhile to spend a little time on that. Next segment, we're going to take your calls, and also I'm going to try to dive into the news. We're going to talk about what's posted up on the Drudge Report, or what's on the latest major news blogs. Things are getting very insane between Russia and Ukraine with the gas being cut off to Ukraine and the recent gas fires of the Gazprom lines. We'll be back in a moment with much more about the Middle East and ISIS and the movement of the George.
You may have heard about taking silver supplements for better health, but not all silver supplements are alike. Silver 100 with OptiSilver from Nutrimedical.com is an ionic silver citrate complex and is unparalleled as the most powerful pathogen.
We are GCN.
And we have a caller, Mark in Oregon. He had a question on thoughts on 180 satellites. Can you go ahead and tell us what the story is?
Yes, good day, Dr. Bill.
Thanks for calling in, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you for being there so I could call in, and thank you for being there for all of those great reasons you are there, Dr. Bill.
I appreciate it. And I think it's important for people to understand that we cover pretty well everything. We try to cover it in a deeper depth than any broadcaster on this network or elsewhere. Sometimes to our peril. Sometimes we're trying to integrate the best of medicine and wellness, the best of geopolitical analysis that ties in spirituality, because if you don't deal with the spiritual dimension, you'll never understand the geopolitical melee that's going on right now. It doesn't make sense. So why in the ancient land, for example, the town of Mosul that was just fallen to ISIS is literally right beside the ancient city of Nineveh. People need to know that there's ancient history being repeated here, and there's ancient prophecies that are going to be fulfilled in the very near future.
Well, absolutely, Dr. Bill. I'm just looking at Jeremiah 50, chapter 50, and chapter 51 now as possibly being on the verge of fulfillment here. I don't know if you related to that yet.
Why did you read it? I don't have my Bible right in front of me, so read Jeremiah, because I love the book of Jeremiah, because these ancient prophets often had what's called a double vision. They had a vision of a near prophetic fulfillment, but the people that are preterists that believe that all of this has previously been prophesied and fulfilled are wrong. Literally 90% of the prophecy in the Bible, which is more than a third, has not been fulfilled, but by the signs of the times will be fulfilled in our day with people that are alive today.
Yes, Dr. Bill, my Bible is in a cabinet within reach of me, but it would take me a minute or so to actually look it up.
That's okay. I can probably pull it up. Just if you want to just hold for 1 second, I can pull it up in 2 seconds. I'm pretty fast on computer. So you're talking about Jeremiah?
Chapter 50 and 51.
50 and 51. Let's see if I can pull it up. Here we go. We get the Bible Gateway book, and it tells us here. Here we are. Chapter 50. The word that the Lord spoke against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Declare among the nations, proclaim, and set up a standard. Proclaim, do not conceal it. Say, Babylon is taken, Bel is shamed, Merodach is broken in pieces, her idols are humiliated, her images are broken in pieces. For out of the north is a nation come up against her, which shall make her land desolate, and no one shall dwell therein. They shall move, they shall depart, both man and beast. In those days and in the time, says the Lord, the children of Israel shall come, and they and the children of Judah together will continual weeping. They shall come and seek the Lord their God. They shall ask the way to Zion with the faces toward it, saying, come and let us join ourselves to the Lord in a perpetual covenant that will not be forgotten. Well, we're talking about a future Israel, because currently Israel is led by primarily globalists like Mr. Netanyahu and his friend Lieberman, who's a bouncer from Eastern Europe. And there are Messianic Christian Jews, if you want to call it Messianic believers, in Israel, and they're growing stronger by the day. They realize, in fact, the state of Israel realizes without Christians here in America and the Western world, but especially in America, and without the Messianic believers in Israel, Israel is doomed. But they're starting to get that message, which is really important. And, of course, it's quite a bit here to Jeremiah 50 and 51. If you look at 51, it says on the top of it, the utter destruction of Babylon. Behold, I will raise up against Babylon and against those who dwell in Leb Kamal, a destroying wind, and I will send winnowers to Babylon, who shall winnow her and empty her land. For in the day of doom they shall be against her all around. Against her let the archer bend his bow. Yeah, we see that now. We see ISIS, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which I'm sure Bashar al-Assad doesn't put forward. He is a Shiite that has collaboration with the Sunnis and the Christians and the Maronite Christians, Orthodox, in state of Syria itself. These states were drawn up by the British to carve up the land so they could get the oil resources and the other resources in the area, and to subjugate the people, to balkanize it, one of their strategies several hundred years ago. And I believe that the destruction that's coming on is basically one of the signs of the destruction against Islam. Islam cannot stand because it's all against itself. It's like when I was listening to one of my friends who's a Jew on the direct TV television. Okay, maybe I'll give you his name a little later. But what happened is he said basically these Islamic factions are against each other. They're all killing each other. We have the Sunnis attacking for the last number of centuries the Shiites. We have different factions within Sunni that don't like each other. We've got extreme elements, and we've got moderating elements that are just like doctors and scientists and educators that they're in stark awareness of the extreme elements that are beheading people, the military and the police. And of course, America is bringing in heavy artillery with the George H.W. But the problem is like I talked to John Moore, and we've had reports by Gerald Salenti and other experts, and our military expert Tim Alexander. When you have a civil insurgency of millions of people, you can't bring in heavy weapons and artillery because you can't ferret out who is the enemy and who's not, and you'll kill a lot of civilians. So I don't see that they're going to be able to bring into play these advanced weapons. They'll probably bring in our special forces. To be honest with you, we can clean up the mess, but we have to disarm these people. We are continually arming Al-Qaeda, and it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the arms that we gave to the various elements of Al-Qaeda to overthrow the element of Syria have ended up in the hands of ISIS as they attack and literally our allies, which is the Iraqi government, and create the mess. So,
Dr. Bill, what is that particular missile that's capable of taking down an airliner?
It's a manpad. It's basically a surface-to-air missile, and there's various types of them, but we've been giving them actually. These are part of the armamentariums that were given through Benghazi. The real Benghazi scandal is that we were giving advanced weapons to al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, and other elements that are sworn to kill Americans and Europeans with manpads to hit airliners as they fly, and to bring them into America and other Western countries and cause disaster. And the thing is, they're in a sense the bad dog that's actually been funded and supported. It all goes back to the Mujahideen, which, by the way, Tim Osman was one of the senior Mujahideen. He's an engineer who was the primary engineer for the largest military base outside the United States. It cost $50 billion to build, north of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And that name, Tim Osman, by the way, is a CIA name. His real name is Osama bin Laden.
Yes, sir.
So we have to understand when we see the convoluted snake-like behavior of America, where we support our enemies, and even when we support the state of Russia and China and militarize or transfer our industry to these countries, we have them on a short choke chain because ultimately the ultimate choke chain is financial. It's the matrix. It's the virtual authentication world that they built with the central node at Schriever Air Force Base. And if you've been listening to the program, you realize that I've unveiled things that no one else has in terms of what's going on with the market. I have a lot more. In fact, I'll probably be releasing, when it's the time and God gives me the word to say so, a series of books which will follow up on clay and iron, and I'll talk about all the specifics, technical and otherwise, of what they're trying to do. But people should realize our God is God. He's not nervous. He's still on the throne, and life and death is in His hands for all of us. He is our God. Yourself, they're also called. Yes, sir. Welcome back, and while you're there, I want you to stay around for a moment. Do you have any other specific questions? But I want to race through some news and get your feedback. And by the way, anybody who likes to call in, it can be a personal issue. I just got a recent book here, in fact. I just want to mention this because I had a real nice lady. I get all kinds of interesting materials. It's a book called Kizuna, K-I-Z-U-N-A. It's a children's book written and illustrated by Joe Rabjon. And if you actually, Google Kizuna, K-I-Z-U-N-A, you can find the book. It is published by Tolk Associates, Chatham, New York. And, of course, this is published. It's basically a children's book. It's kind of like a fantasy about different life forms dealing with the disaster of Fukushima Daiichi. And I want people to understand it's not just a disaster. We have scientists like Professor McKinney, who says all of the signals that indicate that this would be a normal tsunami were not there. There was not a proper P wave. There were other indications that there was literally an under-oceanic tsunami. The first tsunami research was started in 1943 off the coast of Australia by America and by the West, by the British, and we were capable of making tsunamis as far away as that long time ago. I have known from my inside classified sources that the Russians have on the east and west coast, not just the area of the Cumbra Viejo Azor area, but they have literally nuclear weapons lined along the fault line zones that can create tsunamis on either coast. And of course, we have more advanced weapons too. We have level 10 weapons in space that can literally kill everyone in an entire continent without firing one bullet or one missile. We have the reason why we don't have underground space shelters in America is because we have a space shield that's so powerful and effective. No missile can strike America unless they permit it. People need to know that. It's not just a missile hitting a missile. When I arrived in 1994 at the U.S. Missile Command Strategic Defense Star Wars, the first thing they did was the director of Space Command brought us down to a media center, 440-seat media center, underground at Falcon Air Force Base, Schriever, Colorado. Schriever Air Force Base, Falcon, Colorado, 18 miles east of Colorado Springs on Garbage Dump Road, believe it or not. And that facility down miles underground, we had this high-speed elevator, and you had to hold on the sides because your feet come off the floor. They showed us a 45-minute presentation of all the nations that have nuclear weapons, but then they explained their space shield. And, of course, if you recently see the series called Americans, which is about KGB, they're all freaked out in the first season about the presence. My son got the series for my wife, Michelle, for Mother's Day a few weeks ago. And we've been watching that. And, of course, it's all the KGB all freaked out about the missile shield. Now, I talked to the 4-star general underground at Schriever, who was sitting literally between Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronnie Reagan when he announced it. Because he was at a dinner, Ronnie was having a couple of drinks, and Mikhail was on the other side. And Mikhail literally had, as they say in the word, a bird. He freaked out when he realized that America had weapon systems that were literally centuries ahead of anybody else. And part of that is that we've been sequestering the science from these German scientists, but we've also been collaborating with off-world space, if you want to call it, entities and civilizations. Our technology is so advanced, it's ridiculous. And, of course, there's no such thing as dead. You can be dead from a rock in the side of the head or an arrow, or you can be dead because it hit you with a space-based weapon that scrambles your DNA or microwaves you, or it turns on a specific gene. I mean, all these things are available. Right now on the battlefield in Gulf War I, they deployed microwave weapons that could turn on apoptosis, which is programmed cell death in your body. And I just happened to be taking care of a plant, Pratt & Whitney, that was doing experimental offshore research for DARPA on these type of weapons. So, and later on when I worked as a physician taking care of employees that were at Schriever Air Force Base, they told us, we're going to tell you straight up everything so you don't freak out when you find out what the reality is, which is not sci-fi, and America literally is the prescient power of this earth. Anybody who thinks Russia or China, even with their nuclear weapons, even with their biological weapons, yes, they could kill a lot of us. In fact, we have a policy to let them kill a lot of us. PDD 60 put in the first term of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is a globalist. He visited Moscow. He visited Russia before when he was still a student. He was a member of the Rhodes Scholarship crowd, which are Cecil B. Rhodes, these globalists. They want a global civilization. That's why you see the open door policy toward these children that are flooding across the border. Now, I've had discussions with people. Some of them get upset with me when I say, we need to take care of the children who are there, but we need to deport them, and we need to also know where their country is to make sure there's adequate food there. So if they're starving in Nicaragua and other places, fly in food, set up farms, do whatever we have to do to make sure that they can stay in their country. I'm sure these children would be much happier with their family with adequate food, even if it's a subsistence living, but they've got adequate food, they can play in their own yard, they can get an education, they can be connected to have internet and have education. We do it with Christian ministry all the time. That's a fraction of the cost of housing these children or adopting them inside America. And the problem is, you see, I don't have no problem with anybody coming to this country. But if they're a felon or a criminal, which Obama has released over 70,000, I don't think they should be here. I think they should be deported. If they're not a felon, I have no problem with new people coming. I don't care how many millions come. open the spigot to what we need, and whether it's high tech or, if it wasn't for the hardworking Hispanic people coming to California, California wouldn't work, to be honest with you. These are some of the hardest working people. And so I want people to understand my policy is not neither left nor right. I'm for God's people first, and for all people, and I'm for the environment, and for the world, which is a living thing. And unfortunately, people take extreme positions, whether it's balancing the budget, even if it kills Granny on one hand, with some of the people inside the Tea Party. They have some good ideas on the other hand. They need to make sure that they cut the budget, for example, for the IRS, which I think was here. Isn't that wonderful? They cut the budget because these guys were using money to target conservative groups. That's not right. We also need to make sure that we don't have unlimited budgets where you can have billionaires literally trying to steer the political system, so that you got to take the soft money and the money that supports politicians, so they're always basically prostitutes for transnational corporations and billionaires. This is the same garbage that goes on in the Eastern European countries like Ukraine and Russia.
Absolutely.
These are simple things that can be fixed. But the first thing is you got to be right with God first. You got to be right with your fellow man, and you have to be brave. That bravery comes not from our own human nature. It comes from the nature that God puts in us that says, those who love not the truth, I shall send you a strong delusion. The delusion is you can have an economy, you can have a safe world, you can have a world where people can prosper elsewhere, and they can still prosper in America. But what the globalists have done is moved our business elsewhere and not set up robotic factories here in America, not set up feeding stations in these other countries, and supported them. I'm not talking about trillions of dollars. Most of this stuff is low tech. Get a water pump in there. Make sure they know how to irrigate their farms properly. Make sure they have farm equipment, things like that. It's like the old story of teach a man to fish and you fed him for his life rather than you sending him fish, or importing him to America so he becomes a slave laborer in America. Now, there's lots of lower paying jobs here in America that are good jobs. Some of those could be filled by Americans, but there's also high tech jobs. And here in America, I don't think that students going to school should have a debt. I really don't. I think it's obscene that if you have a highly motivated student who wants to get a trade or an engineering degree or a PhD and they're highly motivated, why do we saddle them with a massive debt so they can't even start a family? I think it's crazy.
Bill, everything that you just mentioned, from Fukushima being a black operation, as far as the tsunami, which set it all
It's
off.
also the fact they didn't even fix it. They not only started it. My book will be available probably within a week. My book will be available, and it'll be on CD in about a week, okay? And it's going to include all the emails back and forth over 3.5 years with Chris Harris, other nuclear experts, my research, right down to the nuclear plant design, even things like Starlight, which is a compound developed in the 1970s, and that literally can stand 16 to 20,000 degrees. They could have a Starlight dam above it to dam the water away from the aquifer, because literally there's a water river running under Fukushima. They knew it was there.
Absolutely.
And I provide specific technical answers that can solve this, and then also imaginative answers to say, hey, could you do this? Could you create a crystalline sarcophagus and try to stop moving the corium, but prevent it from generating neutron flux, and get the dang water out of there, because those are your two main dangers, water and neutrons. And guess what? We're sitting on a disaster, not just there, but many nuclear plants that the Japanese want to start. And luckily, Oi was stopped by the courts in Japan. But the Abe government, whom Shinrikyo cult, are hell-bound on opening up these reactors, which is incredibly dangerous for us and them.
The premier independent talk radio network. We are GCN.
I remember when I lost my
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Welcome back. One of the things I tell people to do is I don't just push the nutraceuticals. I push people to get the proper, realize the dangers of some meds, which absolutely should not be taken, and other ones are kind of okay if it's for a period of time. I also recommend screening tests and so on. For example, screening for your lungs. You got chronic lung disease. I post up a new protocol. Screening for your heart, EKGs, treadmills. And if you're not capable of a treadmill, they can do a thing called a Lexi scan, echocardiograms. Sigmoidoscopy, colonoscopy. Our world is so toxic. Everybody's in danger, especially now with the increased levels of radiotoxins from smart meters which affects certain gene complexes. GMO food that's being fed to animals. That's why meat now is so toxic and dangerous. It's, unless you're really certain of the source of your meat and it's organic and it's not fed GMO, and even, for example, something like chicken, most people don't realize that chicken feed has, most of it across the country is laced with arsenic. So if you eat a lot of chicken, you're going to get arsenic accumulating in your body. And of course, the heavy metals come from Asia, so they land even in organic food. So if you're not detoxifying, I tell people they just don't understand we're in a different world. So when women are doing breast cancer screening, I recommend thermography first every year. And if the thermogram shows any major changes, then the next step to do isn't necessarily a mammogram. It can be an MRI scan. CT has very high radiation levels. I like MRI scans with a little carbon tag if there's any changes that shows thermographically, and then a needle biopsy to identify if there's any problem there with your gynecologist or radiologist. Radiologists can do that test. A mammography, if you try to find a place where they don't do mammographic squeezing of the breasts, I know at the St. Francis Hospital, they had a lot of nuns there. Of course, the order was quite well off, and they decided to get some machines that didn't have to cause them. They could lay forward rather than having their breasts squeezed. Women need to lobby for this. I mean, if men had to have their testicles squeezed like women, I think that very few men would go for having a testicular scan where your testicles have to be squeezed down into a machine. Oh. And the thing is, things like sigmoidoscopy and colonoscopy, colon cancer is just extremely high. And a lot of it is because you have dysbiosis. You've got abnormal gut bacteria that deconjugate toxins that your liver's already conjugated. And because you don't correct this over a period of time, you have diverticuli growing anaerobic bacteria and abnormal dysbiotic bacteria that are going to deconjugate toxins. It's no surprise that you develop polypoid changes and colon cancer.
Have to go with the probiotics, absolutely.
That's why our living probiotics are very important, and living probiotic ultra. And I tell people you need to integrate it. For example, controlling diet. Our diets in North America are way too high in salt. We have almost no magnesium. It's insane. If you don't take extra magnesium supplements and potassium, but especially magnesium, and we have magnesium potassium citrate, magnesium glycinate malate, which corrects the mitochondria. We know that, for example, most of our toxins in our body now are blocking CoQ10, which causes a whole range of symptoms from psychological to myofascial pain syndrome, which is most of the pain you see out there is myofascial. And just CoQ10, and we use CoQ10, Supreme, and ubiquinol. So what people need to understand is we provide a lot of solutions, and we can integrate it with some meds. A lot of meds are just like you should never take. Drugs like cardiac drugs like Bistolic, drugs like Coumadin. I don't like Coumadin at all. There's newer, safer drugs if you absolutely have to take something. I can tell you which ones are safe. And then you want to get off them if you can once you've got the situation under control. And you can do non-Newtonian fluid dynamic tests. You can do blood viscosity tests. The QRMA will tell you if your blood viscosity is high. There are tests, for example, advanced tests for children with ADD. You can do a quantitative EEG. You can even do EEG biofeedback to train them how to use both sides of their brain. You can give nutraceuticals to remyelinate, just like there's a delay in bone age. There's a delay in myelin age in parts of their brain where the nerve tracts are not myelinated. That's why their behavior is disturbed and they can't learn. But you can actually reverse that with things like Neurogen, acetyl L-carnitine, Cognition Plus, vinpocetine, or brain power. These are molecular epigenetic switches that actually turn on the things to correct the problem. That's why I really am very much against a lot of the psychoactive drugs that basically turn people into zombies. Don't have any...
Or murderers and such.
Right, well, I call it kill you, Jack, for Prozac. I mean, if you look at Klebold and Harris, and, because they took care of the first young man shot in Columbine, Mark Taylor, we got to see private videos and information and talk to all the kids that survived Columbine, and we got to see some pretty crazy stuff. These kids, Klebold and Harris, they were for debriefing for 3 weeks.
Right.
In Texas. One of their fathers was involved in deep programs in the Air Force. These two young men were basically, if you want to call, I don't know if they were quote, programmed or they're just, because the police and everybody knew about them. They even knew that they had pipe bombs in their house. Like, how many people would allow a neighbor to make pipe bombs in their home? Or the parents?
Yeah, I think the parents were involved somehow, and
something's very, very wrong. But you don't see any prosecutions there. Mm. And then, of course, it's come out recently that school up in the Northeast that they tried to pretend was a real live situation where they killed kids. It was all a drill. I mean, that's really, I've seen that this comes out that was, quote, a drill. It's not a real situation at all.
They're all black ops, Dr. Bill. They're behind everything evil that's perpetrated on us.
I took care of, I was one of the friends to the Chief Missile Command Defense Officer, Colonel Lynn Wills, back in the mid-'90s. And he was even had the dinner at our table. His son was best friends with our son. And his Bible is tabbed at Psalm 91:1. In fact, that's why that scripture now is my favorite scripture, long before 9/11. And he says, those who are under the wings of the Most High God, are protected. And I realized, and he said, I've tabbed it there, so if we get a command from the President and the Joint Chiefs of Staff to start HUI, which is Launch on Command Sequence, that sends to our submarine-launched and land-based nuclear missiles, because it all comes from NORAD, he said, that's what I start reading first. I read that first as I'm hearing the command come through before I do the unlocking codes. Now, is that dramatic or what?
Well, there's a man of faith right there.
Right, there's a Christian. Now, I need people to know that we need to stand in the gap, because our world, especially America, as the last paragraph of this first chapter of the scroll, and there's a number of chapters to be released yet. And those will be released in the books, Clay and Iron, little books that will be coming out here in the next couple of years, because I see with the blood moons, and we're going to get Mark Piltz back on, it integrates perfectly. In fact, I talked about the specific feast days, the exact same feast days that he talks about in the blood moons that was released by the word pictures of the Israeli and Aramaic alphabet. The exact same feast days fit in with rabbinic law and with end-time prophecy. The first day of the last 7 years, and I can say, thus saith the Lord, is going to be the Feast of Sukkot, which is a Feast of Tabernacles, where we will tabernacle. There will be a tabernacle. It doesn't have to even be a temple. It can be a tabernacle of Moses. It can be in some building that they thought was part of the ancient temple. But they're going to do a blood sacrifice. And when they start that blood sacrifice, it will be cut off after 1,230 days on the Feast of Purim, where they have the Hamadashes, and they remember about Haman tried to kill all the Hebrews off.
Would that be the abomination of desolation right there, Dr. Bill?
It is, and the reason why they call it an abomination is it abominates because the blood of Yeshua, who is the Father in the flesh, paid for all the price of sin, and we join that when we actually become a believer in God, and our soul becomes fused to the Spirit and the will of the Most High God, and we go from being a mortal soul, which we are, to becoming an immortal one, a son or daughter of the Most High. That's, quote, salvation.
So that sacrifice that will occur is actually a refutation.
It's a refutation of
to acknowledge the blood and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Exactly. And the point is that the Jews who accept the sacrifice, it says in the Bible, 1/3 will accept that blood sacrifice and will turn from their evil ways, because that's the key. It doesn't matter how good or bad you've been, it's how repentant you are.
That's a fact.
It's how repentant you are. God says, I will cast your sins from the farthest east to the west, to the deepest part of the ocean. I will make your skin, you're like the whitest wool from scarlet. Yeah. And the point is that that God takes us out of ignorance to light. And 30 days later is Pascha. And Pascha, or Passover, is the middle of the last 7 years. And exactly 1,260 days later is the feast of what's called Yom Teruah, which is a feast of the long blowing. It's called the Feast of Trumpets, the final trumpet.
Yes.
And exactly the 17th day of Heshvan is the day when after that, when you talk about those who are secured or sequestered for 45 days under God's protection, the 17th day of Heshvan is the same day prophesied in the Bible, which is in Clay and Iron, the exact same day that Noah received back the dove with the branch.
With the olive branch.
Exactly. So I think we're close. I'm not going to set dates. I think if you look at the terror of the world, if you just looked at it as a secular agnostic and say, I'm a scientist, I'm not believing God and all this stuff. If you just looked at the world's doomed. The world is slowly dying. The oceans are dying. The ozone layer is thinning. The nations are gathered to kill each other with advanced weapons. We have evil in the galaxy and the cosmos that is conspiring to destroy and wipe out mankind. We have good that is conspiring on the side of the Most High God to